McCurley from Decent Labs.
Hello. Check, check. Hello, everybody. ETHDenver 2025. How are we feeling today? Woo woo! Yeah. So my name is Rachel. I go by Rachel on Chain. I'm joined today with my CEO of Decent Labs, Parker McCurley. And to give a quick introduction, I've been in this space for several years. I lead business development efforts at Decent Labs. Some of you might know me as doing on-chain media, podcasting, Twitter spaces throughout the years. I'm a big proponent and huge fan of ETHDenver. I've been coming, this is my 4th year now. And yeah, just so excited to be here today with you all. And yeah, excited to kick off our fireside chat. So Parker, do you want to take a moment to introduce yourself?
Yeah, my name is Parker. I'm the co-founder and CEO of Decent Labs. Yeah, since 2017, I've mostly been focused on decentralized application development and design. And also, I've been coming to ETHDenver since before COVID, so I don't know if it's 5 or 6 or something times now, but really excited to be here, as I always am every year.
Yeah, he's a veteran, you guys, so really excited to finally, hear from Parker here at ETHDenver. And Parker, I'm curious if you can kind of dive into what crypto means to you.
Yeah, I mean, crypto and as a derivative of open source technology, it really represents opportunity to me. Crypto really changed my life, and it's really important to me that the technology remains accessible to people who need it.
So you've been active in the space for a really long time, Parker. So you're like, what, going on 8 years, almost a decade in this space. So just curious, like, what was the catalyst that brought you here to this moment, to Decent Labs?
Yeah, so in terms of my exposure to crypto, I mean, I've been working in the industry for about 8 years now, but I first learned about Bitcoin in high school. I grew up in Cleveland, Ohio, and during the financial crisis, my family and a lot of people in my community were like just really struggling and going through extremely hard times, and I was doing everything that I could to get by, and a friend of mine told me about the Silk Road Marketplace, and I started reading the Silk Road forums, and a lot of the early adopters were kind of proposing Bitcoin as a solution to the financial collapse and to prevent that in the future. So yeah, I have a much more nuanced take on the '08 financial crisis and economic collapse now. But I do think for me as a teenager who was in a lot of pain, it was really, validating and enlightening for me to read this.
Yeah, so is there a particular moment or experience that galvanized your belief in decentralization? I mean, everything you would do at Decent, you really believe in the ethos and live the ethos of decentralization. What made that belief so strong in you?
Yeah, I mean, so something I've realized this week, it's that everybody I know who's a builder in this space has had an experience that has caused them to be attracted to the principles of crypto. And those principles are generally, maybe some people might call them paranoid, but I think usually have to do with experiences that we've had with authority figures. So, in terms of like my belief in decentralization, I guess like that started with, my experiences with institutions. Like I'm sure everybody has, whether it's with hospitals or the education system or the court system. I think a lot of the most vital institutions that provide for everyone aren't designed in a way that really holistically aligns the people that are providing those services, the people that need those services. So there's that kind of just lived experience that I think everybody shares. When I started Decent and I learned about things like accredited investorship, money transmitter licenses, money services businesses, and more, it really kind of made me feel, at the time, I felt that regulation was designed to cut off access to opportunity for poor people. That's how I felt about it. And again, my take on regulation has become a little bit more nuanced over the years. But finally, the thing that made me convinced that our industry wouldn't survive without decentralized organizations was my experience working with Celsius.
Okay.
So when Decent was an agency, we worked with tons of clients, but the proudest day of my career was when we closed a web development deal with Celsius, which at the time was the largest consumer brand in crypto. And for a year later, for me to wake up and read in the news that the company that we had played a very small but proud role in was a fraud, and then of course what happened with FTX and Three Arrows, I kind of became convinced at that point that if we're dealing with the risk and volatility of digital assets, then we cannot rely on a central authority or technology infrastructure to contain it.
Well, I'm curious. So you were mentioning how a common thread in this space is people experiencing hardships, issues with authority. I'm curious with the hardship that you experienced early on with, coming into contact with Celsius. How did you come back from that?
Yeah, so that was 2022 was a really hard year for me and a really hard year, I think, for a lot of people in our industry. We had just gotten done with a few years of kind of growth, and I think kind of feeling like with DeFi and with the social DAOs and NFT stuff happening, it felt like crypto had finally sort of reached this, I don't know if you want to call it mainstream adoption or recognition, but it felt really good. And towards the end of that bull run, it started to smell quite a bit like 2017. There was a lot of overvalued projects, a lot of hype. So I went out to raise venture capital for the first time because I wanted our business to be able to continue growing through the kind of writing on the wall bear market. And yeah, it was about 2 weeks after we closed our round that the Three Arrows Capital kind of domino started. And I honestly, I didn't want to be a part of the industry anymore at that point. I was depressed. I felt like I had signed up for a lie and that I had kind of been like rugged by the philosophy of crypto. And yeah, it took me a really long time to kind of recover from that and figure out how can I align my work at Decent with the impact that I wanted crypto to make in the world. And that ended up leading me to MCon, which is a meeting of
Shout out
DAO
MCon.
enthusiasts. And for the first time since 2017, 2018, I found myself in a room full of weirdos that saw the world the same way, and I decided that was the path that we were going to go down at Decent.
I love it. Okay, so at what point, I'm curious, you decided to turn Decent into a DAO. What was the catalyst for that moment?
Yeah, so I'm sure most people here have probably heard of Eric Voorhees, the founder of Shapeshift and Venice. But he was one of my earliest inspirations in crypto because basically he had massive balls and decided to just be a central anonymous exchange before Uniswap existed. So the 2017 kind of ICO bubble really blew up after Shapeshift came out and that infrastructure existed. So lucky enough, as I was fundraising and sort of feeling disillusioned by crypto, I met Eric and I had a chance to talk to him about turning Shapeshift into a DAO and about how I always wanted to have a token at Decent and I wanted Decent to be a decentralized organization. But instead I was the CEO of a 30-person company in an industry where I was espousing decentralization as a solution to all of these problems. So I had that talk with him and I got really excited and I went home the next day and I told everybody that they're not employees anymore and we're decentralizing and I'm not the CEO and we're becoming a DAO, and it was a disaster.
Well, okay, so you went from that to deciding to build an operation platform for DAOs. So I think the common thread for your story is you've always cared about decentralization. So can you kind of share a little bit about why you've decided to create a DAO operations platform through Decent?
Yeah, so I think, going back to crypto being opportunity for me and for others, and I want Decent to provide that opportunity for others. When we first started looking at the DAO model, we were really thinking about decentralized execution and versus decentralized governance. And I think a lot of people that they sort of have this attachment to the vision of decentralization, they sort of naturally think this way because if you look at Bitcoin or any other validator network or decentralized organization that relies on its contributors to function, those systems are really inspiring because it's sort of like, hey, like come one, come all, here's this protocol that you can contribute to or that you can be a part of. And the incentives are such that this thing will continue attracting people and it will continue growing. And those systems are very resilient and they're really interesting. But I mean, if you look at Bitcoin, right, like I was pitched Bitcoin as a 50-year plan. And I think for most startups, we're trying to accomplish maybe slightly less impactful things, but on shorter timelines. So, the first thing we did was to try this decentralized execution. We got rid of our Slack and we turned all of our company conversation, all of them into public channels that anyone could read. And we sort of open sourced the company. We did everything in plain sight. And our expectation was sort of if you build it, they will come. And by seeing all the cool stuff we were building and what we were up to, that all these other like really talented and capable people would like show up and like help us, and that totally didn't happen. When we think about decentralized governance, where we're talking about token holders having transparency, so having as equal awareness of what's happening as a core team. When we're talking about organizations operating on chain, so that there's not the types of security vulnerabilities that we can't tolerate in crypto that we've seen from the Celsiuses of the world. And also, like just the whole idea was really attractive to me, that people could just find Decent and start participating and grow their careers and their knowledge through it. But that really didn't work out for us.
Well, I mean, where I'm coming in now, I mean, being around for 8 years, I feel like Decent's really had a chance to mature the product, the team, everything. I feel like I'm so grateful to be coming on at this time where everything's, they've had 8 years to build this out, and it's been really beautiful to come on at this time. And I'm curious, I mean, you don't get there overnight, obviously. I mean, has anybody here been in this space over 5 years? Okay, we got some veterans. Okay, so Parker and Decent, they've been around for almost a decade, you guys. So I mean, I just have so much respect for those of us here that, continue showing up cycle after cycle. We've been punched and beaten down over and over and just keep showing up. So I think that's absolutely incredible. So I'm curious, what are some of the early mistakes you made at Decent, and how did you learn from those?
Yeah, well, I'm gonna focus on Decent DAO just because this isn't like a entrepreneur-focused talk, but when we first started the DAO, I mean, like I said, our first problem was we confused decentralized execution for decentralized governance, and we focused on creating this network effect-driven contributor incentive structure. And at the end of the day, I think it's fairly provable that fairly homogenous small teams are really effective at building things and getting things done. And so now Decent operates like many DAOs or protocols do, where we have a core team that's developing a software product, and they're extremely focused, and this is all that they do, and this is what they're here for. And they are beholden, right, to a DAO, to a token holder controlled treasury that funds us and gives us strategic consent and input, and elects leaders into the system so that they can be held accountable by token holders.
Awesome. Can you explain more of the difference between decentralized governance and decentralized execution?
Yeah. So, I mean, as I mentioned, right, I think the best example would be looking at something like a validator network, where you're relying on other people working in a decentralized format to contribute to something working, or governance, where it's more about disclosure, transparency, and financial control given to token holders.
Awesome. Okay, so going into the next question.
A couple more mistakes to talk about.
Oh yeah. Okay. Sure.
Yeah. So another one, when we first started building Decent, and this kind of taught me how powerful composability is. We built all of our own smart contracts. Like, our team have been Solidity developers for many years, so we built our own treasury software, our own governance software. And when we went to on-chain orgs to try to sell it, they were like, "Why would we move $100 million from this contract to another for any reason?" Right? So we ended up building, and this is a lesson I think for any developers, in a composable way, where our UI connects many very popular and heavily tested smart contracts like OZ Governor, Safe, Sablier, Hats, and provides them in a single user interface. So I think building where you're relying on the momentum of the open source ecosystem that's developed in crypto is extremely important.
Absolutely. So how do you approach Decent's operating structure today?
Yeah, so I alluded to this a little bit, but we have a core team that operates in the United States and the EU. They're contractors to a US-based LLC, and we operate like any other startup. Like, I'm the founder and CEO, so I do fundraising, product strategy, BD, and our team is mostly focused on growing the product and building the product. The DAO, which is a foundation in Cayman Islands, is operated by a completely different group of people whose job is, again, managing the token holder community, the decentralized governance and resource allocation for Decent, and holding our team accountable for continuing to build good software and acting in the best interest of the protocol.
Yeah. And I do want to comment, as we are getting close to the end of time here. Yesterday, we hosted the On-Chain Legal Summit at the Biddle Hub. And Parker here has been really putting an emphasis on structuring things legally and compliantly with Decent Labs and Decent DAO. So Parker, the Blockchain Association joined us yesterday from Washington, D.C. I know you're really paying attention to the current regulatory landscape and doing things legally and compliantly. Why are you putting so much emphasis into legally structuring this DAO? And yeah, it sounds extremely complicated and expensive. How are you navigating that?
Yeah, so on a personal level, the reason for this approach is because I want to live in America, have a token, and sleep at night. And doing all three of those things at once is really difficult. So, when I go down this path and design process of becoming a DAO, our thought is, okay, how do I do this in a compliant way? Well, compliance doesn't exist in the United States for digital assets yet, although quite soon. And so I looked for jurisdictions and landed on Caymans that have more mature digital asset regulation. And my mindset here was, when US-based regulation occurs, I can point back and say, look, I was an entrepreneur doing the best that I could. We were completely legal and above board in the jurisdictions that support that. And now we're ready to, do whatever we need to continue scaling and growing in this new regulatory environment. What's really exciting to me is that not only has our industry become efficient at building both the on-chain and off-chain systems for true decentralized governance and organizations, but the game itself is getting much easier. So, as of the last 2 months, effectively, the SEC has been giving, first of all, for the first time, direct guidance on its plan to lessen its attacks on tokens and its attacks on builders. I think we don't have a framework in the US to do this yet in a way that's nationally or federally recognized. But I do see thousands of builders right now and thousands of projects and thousands of tokens that are going live this year that I'm so excited about because people feel empowered to do so using the offshore structure that most protocols take advantage of.
Absolutely, and I just want to say, if you're a founder, if you're a builder, if you're anyone that's interested in learning more about Decent Labs, give us a follow at Decent DAO, and come connect with us after the talk. We'd love to hear about your projects and hear how we can support you. There's also a QR code up here. If you guys want to scan this, you can hop into our Telegram, drop a GM, come say hello, come connect with us. We'd love to have you guys in our community. And yeah, Parker, I'm curious, final question here. What do you see for the future?
Yeah, well, I think even especially after this weekend with the Bybit hack, I think reliance on central dependencies, be it people or software, is going to become increasingly unacceptable for our industry. It's just not safe. Anything that can be hacked in crypto will be hacked. And also, I really want to get to a point where forming a DAO in a safe way that protects its members is cheaper than forming an LLC in the United States. That's part of our mission at Decent, is this accessible opportunity. If you're interested in launching a DAO or a token or an NFT or anything cool, and you're a little bit scared about it, feel free to talk to me. I've navigated that path myself.
Yeah, we are at time here, you guys. So yeah, let's give a round of applause for Parker McCurley, Decent Labs. And yeah, if you want to connect with us, we're gonna hop off the stage, come say hi, and we'd love to hear about your projects.